sheet here with all. I will launch the entry poll with all of you guys now, and I hope you can see it on the screen. The question here is, which information do you consider critical for calculating the ROI of renting or buying a specific property? It's a multiple choice. You can click those issues that you think are really the most relevant for you to calculate the ROI. It can be average energy consumption, average water consumption, real-time IAQ data, information on medical leave statistic that might be very difficult to get in a place that you want to rent or buy, confidential information potentially. I know from some clients that I work for, the medical health insurance, usually if there is a deal for the whole company has such kind of data, then information on green building certification might be relevant, information on healthy building certification, and information from industry benchmarks such as GRESB or measurable. What are the items that you would love to have to be able to calculate an expected return of investment before you rent or buy a specific property? Joey is asking whether the recording will be available. That is usually the case. I don't see any reason why it should be different today. And the speakers have as well given their consent to share the PDFs of their presentations. So don't worry too much about writing everything down. You should get the presentations and the recording. We have now about 65% of the current participants responded. I'll give it a couple of more seconds until we have hit 70%. That's a good figure. I need one more. Yes, 72. Great. Excellent. Let me end the poll and show you now we have already 75. That's great. Let me, Joey will be uploading this webinar on the YouTube, so it will be made available. Now we've got 80%. Let me end the poll and share the results with you guys. You should be able to see it on the screen now. The number one choice that 74% of you guys would love to have to calculate the ROI is the average energy consumption in kilowatt electricity per meter square of building envelope. We'll hear a building space. We hear a couple of examples from Hans later on that are largely based on the ROI from the energy efficiency resulting from different measures. Then the second highest support from you guys got green building certification information, and the third highest healthy building certification. So there is a very strong belief within our community of participants present. You can say half of everyone present today is saying, yes, green building certification and healthy building certification and the details thereof will help me to better calculate the ROI. And then we have just behind that, we have information on industry benchmarks, the GRESB or measurable data, or as well the real-time IAQ data, 35%. Now, interesting is that only 9%, like very few of you, don't think the medical leave statistic are relevant. This is interesting. And Joey says as well, medical savings and missed day work school, those things are sometimes a little bit gray. I know medical leave might sometimes as well be people not getting enough formal holidays and taking medical leave because they have to urgently do something else. That depends on the country. But I think if you can get benchmarks, let's say one office tower has double the medical leave statistics of another office tower, that should make you think twice. There might be an issue with certain aspects of the building. So yes, great, excellent. That's a good gauge for all of us. Feel free to screenshot this. And energy is the number one item. It's the easiest to calculate. It's in everybody's accounts. Accountants have that data on their fingertips. Okay, I stop sharing now. That was a good entry point. And I will hand over the mic and the screen to Paula Huerta, our expert all the way from Lombok in Indonesia, originally from Spain, then spent a couple of years in Singapore, and she has really an incredible story. She is a sustainable design specialist, architect, lead AP, amazing experience and competency, and she will share measuring the impact of healthy buildings as well from a qualitative perspective, and we'll hear the story about her beautiful bamboo house in Lombok and the monkeys. Over to you, Paula.
Thank you so much, Matthias. Hello, everybody. How are you? I hope you're doing fine, whether it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, because this is a very international, I think it's like United Nations in a small little Zoom meeting. Here today, we are going to talk about healthy buildings. And as Matthias said, I am an architect. I have worked over 15 years as a sustainability consultant. I currently have my own studio based in Lombok, where I design net zero sustainable architecture. And I'm also an ambassador for circular economy. So I must admit that at the beginning, when they asked me to speak about healthy buildings, I was like, yeah, sure. You know, obviously I have a lot of experience in healthy buildings because in green certifications, there's so many indicators that are combined and shared among healthy buildings and green certifications like air quality or daylighting. But I was a bit confused when they asked me about the ROI of healthy buildings, because for me in particular, when I think about a healthy building, the last thing I think about is money. In my personal life, there was a moment where I chose to live my 6-figure salary and my very urban city life in Singapore, working in corporate, to move to Lombok, Indonesia, and live in my own, my self-designed and built home. So together with my husband, we built our net zero bamboo house, and we live with my son a very low impact life. It's a bioconstruction home. So of course, I studied a lot the traditional Indonesian architecture, the vernacular architecture. I applied everything that I knew on passive design. My house is completely cross-ventilated. I don't have aircon. I did several studies on sun movement. I live in the forest, surrounded by nature, looking at the ocean. So on that personal level, obviously for me, to move to a healthier building was a choice, and it had nothing to do with money. We obviously, being a bioconstruction home, we use natural materials, natural cross ventilation, passive design. I study the sun movement and the inertia, the thermal inertia of all of the materials, the orientation, and what was the airflow depending on the seasons, and the best layout to take advantage of those natural resources. So I really do know what it means to live on a healthy home and what that provides you as a person and for your well-being. We use obviously solar panels to power our home. We recycle all of our water with planters that then we reuse for our irrigations. We've applied a lot of permaculture to our garden. So when I am saying that I don't think about money when I think about healthy building, it's really not because I don't believe that there is an economical benefit. Obviously there is, and you know, as some of the listeners were talking, there is like absence reports. There's so many reports that prove that it's more economical to have a healthier building. But I truly know that they bring so many other benefits that it's not just economical. So I think we really need to use a different way to measure healthy buildings. So all the statistics show that on developed countries, we spend more than 90% of our times in buildings. Healthy buildings focuses on the people, on the building users. And because of what that number implies, the fact that most of our life experience happens inside buildings, when we think about healthy buildings, it's not so crazy to understand that it affects us so much, that all of our transactions and things that matter to us beyond money are happening inside those buildings. Healthy buildings refer to so much more than just an economical parameter. Obviously, and since, you know, after World War II, where GDP was measured, was the way to measure a country's success. We've taken the economical value as something that it measures the prosperity and the progress of a country, which is a good thing, but as the cliche says, money can't buy happiness, right? And in fact, Sterling, who was an economist, he measured the average happiness, and let's rephrase that and say the average people contentment. And they measure how much GDP was growing. And there is a moment where GDP, and especially in poorer countries, it's very much linked to well-being and contentment of the population. But there is a moment that those lines diverge. So here we can see how in the 70s until the 2000s, the GDP went up by a large amount, and yet people contentment and happiness was the same. So there was in 2010 where Bhutan introduced the idea that they wanted to measure their well-being and their success as a country with what they called the happiness gross index. And that, you know, this is a really new concept. It's only 11 years old, but since then, there's so many new indicators that are in line with this idea. The idea that we should measure success not with an economical indicator, but instead with a well-being indicator. And we have the United Nations now developing their World Happiness Report. We have the Earth Institute, we have the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, we have the Gallup report. There's so many indicators that are in line with this idea that they are trying to measure beyond GDP. So how do they measure well-being? And this is something that it's common in all of these different indicators, including Bhutan's. So the main indicator that is common to all of them is equality. No, it's the main pillars of well-being, where everybody has enough to live in comfort, safety, and health. So they would measure things like life expectancy, expectancy, access to healthcare, equal access to education, public health parameters. They also look at education levels, time use, how much time you're working versus how much you can spend at home with your family, access to the environment, having a healthy environment around you and how accessible it is to people. This is key, because mental health is so linked to the to nature. So that goes to the eco-psychology. It is proven that the more time we spend looking at nature and being in contact with nature, the healthier it is our mind. There is a sense of justice also, and a lot of sense of community. How much do we engage with our community, with our political neighbors, our civic engagement? So, and definitely safety, right? So if we consider all of this, no, comfort, safety, health, and if we look at the way we measure healthy buildings and we compare it, healthy buildings tackle the exactly same thing. So this is taken from Harvard, the 9 foundations of healthy buildings, which is a little bit, you know, like the Bible of healthy buildings, I would say. And if you look at it, they look at ventilation, air quality, thermal comfort, light and views, dust and pests, moisture. All of that is related to health. And not only health of our lungs, but also health of our mind, and also health of, you know, everything that we are doing, how we're feeling. Then there is a lot of comfort. We live in comfort if we are inside a healthy building. And there is also healthy buildings related to active health, like how we design so that people move, so that people gather, so they have this intuition to gather, and these spaces where it's nice to gather together. So that's the engagement in the community and how embraced you feel by the group, right? And then it's obviously safety and security is a huge part of healthy buildings. So healthy building brings contentment and brings well-being. And, you know, we look at it and it's so easy to see the link between a well-being and a healthy and a happy society and a well-being and a healthy and a happy building. So we're looking at air, water, VOC of gas and materials, fitness, daylighting, views. It's exactly the same thing on a smaller parameter that they're looking at in the happiness indexes. And, you know, we're talking buildings here, but imagine that on the bigger scale, on the urban scale, no? How the city can bring you those same ideas and concepts to you. Back to the number, really, if we really want to have resilient populations, we need healthy buildings. With COVID, we've seen how important it's been for us to live in a nice building, to have a ventilated building, to have a healthy building, to not get sick, to feel good if you need to be at home. It's really important that we consider healthy buildings beyond the money indicators, because it brings so much more to us as populations. In those healthy buildings, we can create more successful companies of the future, healthier and happier communities, families, smarter and more motivated students that will not only generate profits, but will also generate thriving nations that will be able to weather crises like the one we just went through in a much better way and with a much better attitude than if we didn't have these healthy buildings. So I hope that got you thinking, and thank you very much for your time.
Yes, all right, great, Paula. Thank you very much for this very insightful sharing. And we had some interesting comments as well. Joey was saying in the US, you can't really get much data on health issues with regarding to employees. Can I ask you the non-confidential question? For the last few years that you've lived in your house, how many days sick leave have you had?
No, we don't get very sick. And we can see it also in our baby. A lot of our friends that live in aircon houses, no, then they don't open the windows because the mosquitoes or the bugs would come in. So they are constantly breathing on this aircon environment. My solution: put mosquito nets on the windows. They're much cheaper than AC. And get your building to ventilate. Our grandmas knew this very well back in the days, right? And yes, what was the first thing that they would tell you on COVID? Open your windows at least once a day for 1 hour. So yes, it is, and there are many indicators that show that people in healthy buildings are less absent, and even indicators that show how students that have views to natures or a park are so much more productive and engaged with the class and better with their academic results than students on the same course, the same level of education and the same area, if they don't have any views to any natural spots. So there are many studies that prove this. It's just that, like I said, we are really focused on ROI and money because of, you know, the tradition that we have with the GDP. And just as a hint, before we were using GDP to measure national success, countries would measure it based on military victories. So the same way we move from military victories to GDP, now it's time for us to move from GDP to well-being.
Yeah, that's a great comment. That's a great comment. And I mean, the fact that you guys have hardly ever been sick since you lived there, because you have the passive fresh air all the time, which is the best way of living and the best way of preventing sicknesses. I always remember the story from one company in the Philippines. They used to have a building in Makati, but then they built a super eco and health-friendly new building in BGC with Zen corners, fresh food. And the owner said that they had a nurse in the old building, and they actually made allocation for a nurse in the new building as well. In the old building, that nurse was busy with headaches and respiratory diseases. In the new building, the nurse was virtually unemployed. No job anymore to do. It was incredible. And I saw a quantified attempt by Refinitiv. Refinitiv is the ESG data rating agency owned by the London Stock Exchange. They analyzed Chinese companies and European and North American companies with regards to top employee safety, health, wellness, and motivation companies. They picked up that data from the internet through AI, and worst performing companies in terms of employee safety and wellness. And the difference in terms of share price was huge. The ones who had great performance on employee motivation, employee safety, employee wellness, had much better share price development over the last 15 years that they analyzed than those who had a very bad record. So this is another indication that this is not just something we dream about. This is real. We just find it difficult to quantify, but this is happening. So thank you so much, Paula, for those great sharings. We can come back to that later on in the Q&A session. I will now hand over to Hans, who will be sharing some hardcore ROI examples with the figures and showing us that money makes the world go round. Hans Vermas is the managing director of NEAPOLI Sider & Berhard, based currently in Kuala Lumpur, but originally coming from the beautiful Holland.
That's right. I need to make sure my microphone is on, right? Is it on?
All good.
All good. All right, then we are good to start. First of all, I'm working now for green building consultancy here in Malaysia, and first point, I actually fully understand what Paula is saying. Health, well-being, happiness, certainly one of the things that need to be taken into consideration. I also believe in Matthias's story about how good companies that care about employees and that care about safety will outperform on the stock market. But in the end, I still think that it is money that makes the world go round. Things that we cannot measure, we cannot manage. If we cannot manage it, we will not do it. And therefore, there is always this focus back on the metrics. So actually today, I want to talk about the harder aspects of the ROI, basically the accounting perspective and the claim from USGBC that a green building owner reports a return on investment for existing buildings of close to 20% and 10% for new buildings. And when I saw this one, I thought, that's interesting. And actually, return on investment of 20% and 10% tends to be quite good. And I wanted to check this with our own projects that we have done in KL for our company and see whether those numbers actually stack up. So I've prepared for you 3 case studies, one from an existing building, one from a new building, and one from an interior design building, and to compare and contrast these things. I focus here mostly on the energy savings. Just like we said before, it's the one that is most easily measured. It's the one that I'm comfortable that the data is validated and correct. I do understand that when we look at ROI, we also can take into consideration share prices, tax incentives, and a whole range of other elements to get that full picture. If you have a finance background, I have a small finance background. I used to work in private equity. You understand that it's as much an art as it is a science to calculate this, but we go over it relatively easy. So the first case study I want to present to you is the one from PKNS headquarters in Shah Alam in Malaysia. This building is LEED Platinum certified. And through a variety of actions, we were able to reduce the energy consumption, or here we call it the BEI, the kilowatt hours per square meter per year, from 220, which is a typical office in Malaysia, or the benchmark, to 79, which is a reduction for 64%. Now, you must of course ask me, okay, that's fine. How about water? For water, actually pretty much the same. Through the installation of efficient taps and fixtures, we were able to reduce this from approximately 4,000 cubic meters to 2,000 cubic meters, saving 49%. The next question would be, that's fine, these are impressive percentages, but how much money did you actually save? this comes back to $150,000 annually. Now, bear in mind, right, we are from different people all over the world, and a dollar is not necessarily equal everywhere in the world. So if you're based in the US, 150,000 US dollars may not seem like a huge amount of money, but actually for the countries here in Southeast Asia, Malaysia in particular, this is a substantial amount of money and definitely worth pursuing. Now, how do we calculate the ROI? So basically, we look at how much we are saving and how much additional cost that we put in. So here I know the figure that the additional costs for this green and getting to platinum, including a massive amount of solar and other things, was less than 3.3%. Yeah. Let's assume that the building was $32 million to construct. This is roughly the price, but I chose this number because it makes the math very easy. The incremental cost that was incurred to have this as a green building was $1 million US. Remember that we have 150,000 savings per year, meaning that depending on the time frame that we are looking at, we either earn this money back in 6 years, or over a 10-year period, we have a 50% ROI, a net present value, if you're familiar with the terms of 115,000, or an IRR, which stands for the internal rate of return of 6%. And actually, these are good figures. When we extend this period a little bit longer, these numbers goes up. This is the, basically the art and the science of the math that sits behind it. But very good and solid performance in these things. How did we do this? Partially solar, partially efficient HVAC. You see these on the left, you see these window, different shapes. These actually been parametrically optimized to get the right amount of shading. I have a lot of natural ventilation, rainwater harvested, and this is how we got to this one. So actually in the first case for this LEED Platinum building, I think we are in agreement with LEED that we get to that 10% of savings or ROI. Case number 2 I want to present for you is actually for one of the leading malls in KL. The backstory here is that after 15 years of operation and some level of improvements and upgrades, actually they came to the conclusion that their HVAC system wasn't really functioning optimally and that they knew that they were losing money. They were spending approximately 13 million ringgit, which would be close to 4 million, 3 to 4 million US dollars per year in terms of running the HVAC or ACMV system into the mall. The question is, we actually did the work, looked at how much money could be saved, and we concluded that with an investment of 2 million or less than 2 million, there was a realizable savings of 1.1 million. I have underlined the word realizable, meaning that actually we identified more savings, but because the company is relatively conservative, they didn't want to push the boundaries too much and wanted to go for the lower hanging fruit. Same thing, when you have an investment of 2 million and annually you save 1.1 million, the ROI becomes fantastic. Here I look at a 3-year ROI because the client wanted to look at 3 years. So you've got 65% improvement there, a net present value of close to $1 million and an IRR, internal rate of return, of 30%. For the people who are not familiar with an IRR, basically this is the same thing as your interest rate on your savings account. So every year you get basically 30% return on your investment. ROI and ROI is slightly different, but no need to worry about this. How do we do this? Actually pretty straightforward. And just looking at the engineering experiment, looked at the valves, reinstating, cleaning, dampers, set points, heat recovery wheels, all of this kind of stuff. But looking at this holistically, we're able to really identify a lot of savings here. And again, the executives or the accountants, very happy with this approach, right? They ultimately look at this, and I'm not discounting the value of health. I'm not discounting the value of comfort, but ultimately, through my interactions with these people, I know what they look for, and that is basically those numbers. How much do I save? What is my return on investment? As long as this is there and it's quantifiable, they will go ahead. The last one that I wanted to show you is one of the existing buildings. This was the L'Oreal headquarters in KL. Basically, what happened here is L'Oreal moved from one headquarters or one building to another one. And in that move, we looked at, again, here, both the energy reduction and water reduction through intelligent design, daylighting, sensors, HVAC, all that part. We're able to reduce energy by 35% and water reduction again by 50%. When we do the calculation here, we are saving $16,000 annually. Of course, this is much less than before, but we are talking about one floor, or in this particular case, actually, yeah, one floor in a building rather than an entire building. And $16,000 annually, still a reasonable amount of savings. So how do we do it? Careful site selection, onboard green consultants like us from the start, and make sure the interior designer was also selected based on sustainability criteria, and really incorporate this from the beginning. Another way of calculating this, right? We take the opposite approach. Given the savings of $16,000 per year, what investment? We're taking the same accounting principles. What investment would justify this internal rate of return of 10%? Right, saying that if you want to make an investment, you expect to have 10% year on year over a period of 5 years. You do the calculation, basically comes back to $70,000. Again, actually, I know for certain this is not the amount of money that L'Oreal actually spent in additional cost. Why was this additional cost low? Because they onboarded us early, everything is integrated, and actually they got good value for money. And the investment in green sustainability pays off very, very quickly. Now, last slide. When going green, I just highlight the big 5. We talk mostly here about energy and efficiency. Why do I talk about energy efficiency? Because I have the data, because the data is easily accessible, because I can quantify it, I can tabulate it, I can find outliers, I can just put it in an Excel sheet and I can calculate it. Easy. All the other things that you see here, also important, even also still quantifiable, unlike some of the things that Paula mentioned, which are equally important. But we look at carbon emission, we look at reduced maintenance costs, and even we know from research that properties that are green or green certified have higher real estate value, so you can rent it out for or sell it for a higher price. They have higher rental rates, and they have lower vacancy rates. So if you're an owner, you probably would like to push for this. All of this together, I think, to be honest, I think there's as much a case, or at least there's a strong case, to look at purely the fundamental financial aspects and say all of the things that USGBC was saying, and saying existing building 20% savings, new buildings 10% ROI, they seem to be aligned with what we have here. And I think from this part, I wanted to share with you just the 3 case studies and tell you that I think this is correct. Green buildings are good investments and should be considered from an accounting perspective as well as from the other perspectives. And I think that is pretty much it from my side, Matthias.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Hans. That's great. Real straightforward examples that accountants will love. Is it fair to say, because electricity costs in Malaysia are fairly low, that in other countries similar measures would have yielded even higher ROI, and that the key is really to get the green advisor or the health sustainability advisor in at the beginning of the project to get it all right?
I think the last point is exactly the case, right? There's a myth that green buildings are expensive and that you have to pay a lot. And actually it's a myth. When you bring on board the right people early in that process, you discuss with them in a proper dialogue, you can work together to identify loads of strategies and features that can be incorporated at no extra cost or at minimal extra cost. However, what happens often is you bring the green consultant in at the very end, and then they will start saying, oh, this is not right, this might need to change. And of course, when all the decisions are made, it becomes expensive. So all of the projects you see here, early engagement is key to keeping those costs low.
Great. Yeah. Paula, quick comment.
Wouldn't you say that this is obviously everything you said is true, but also the operations, having people that know how to use the building as per the design?
Oh, for sure.
Because that's key, haven't you noticed the gap sometimes between the people operating the building and the design intention from the specialist?
Oh, yes. Very good point. And I think this is, to be honest, this is the next level of awareness that may need to come in. I sometimes equate this to the following story. I think 20 years or 30 years ago, people that worked in IT were stuffed somewhere in the basement of the building, and they're like, oh, these are the geeks doing these kind of things. Now a CIO or CTO are considered key roles. Building management still sits somewhere in the basement. They're still treated as people with a screwdriver, but actually they've got a key role to play. And there's tremendous value in making sure that the building operates as intended. And I expect that over the next period of time, with AI, with measurement, that their role becomes crucial in managing cost, performance, comfort, and all of those things.
Yeah, actually, I think the building maintenance guys, they've been hidden there because they are not supposed to cause any trouble, and they're supposed to make sure that there's no problem cropping up. Yeah. But the future will be them being at the board table, adding value. And I think ESG, environment, social governance, being something that the financial investment industry is looking for, is increasingly pushing the diversification of sustainability to HR and to building management, because that's the data that you need to calculate carbon footprints and ROIs and so on. So great stuff. We have more time for calculation later. We have first question coming in. My suggestion is put your question not in the chat, but in the Q&A function. It's easier to manage. There's a question about bamboo. We'll come back to that later on after we have a quick intervention, a very important one, to try and make the link now between all this quantification on the environmental efficiency side, particularly energy and water. Water a bit more tricky because water is usually very cheap, so it's more difficult to justify the ROI there, even though it's so critical when we have the water crisis. And Raymond, who is the manager enterprise solutions at uHoo, I gave him the challenge and he took it on. Hey, Raymond, can you look at the literature and best practice and quickly distill for us some efforts to quantify the linkage between indoor air quality and those parameters and quantified returns that are associated to it? So over to you, Raymond. Please share with us what you found out there.
Sure, Matthias. Thanks, Paula, Hans, and thanks for having me. Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'll make this quick and I'll just share my screen here, just to demonstrate, when we talk about qualitative and quantitative, like Paula and Hans mentioned earlier, how does that play into indoor air quality? Where does it stand? Where does it fit in? So this is something that I want to share with everybody in terms of the research that's already been done. I just want to quickly share that it's been 10, 15 years ago since this was done. And it's done by the National University of Singapore. So it's the top university in Singapore. And this is a team that went through 133 buildings in Singapore, and they took a sample size of 473 tenants, which is a 10% sample rate. And basically they found out, like, throughout, generally you find issues, with, for example, the temperature being too cold, air movement, a lack of air movement, and carbon dioxide levels that's too high in the office buildings. So that all these issues resulted in health complaints from the respondent. You can see here on my next slide, 85.7% of them responded with health complaints. So this was done before an IAQ audit. Right, and when you talk about absenteeism, the effects of that, you have 140 days of absenteeism from these guys, all the way from the professionals and the secretary functions as well. And if you quickly take a look at Exhibit 7, these are all the symptoms that they complain about. So this is typical of what we call a sick building syndrome, headaches, dry throat, irritation, lethargy, drowsiness, all that good stuff, right? So these are all the numbers that came back. And I think that really touches on the qualitative side of things. How are you feeling? How are your employees feeling? And so, and how does that relate into a building scenario, 20 floors, 30 floors. And if you look at on the right, exhibit 9A, this is a cost benefit analysis of improving your IAQ over the period of years. And I made it a very, very important point to highlight the box in red, focusing on absenteeism and the medical fees and medicine, that these are all the costs incurred. And you can see from year 1 all the way to year 2, 3, 5, 6, these are the costs and savings that comes back to the employer. You look at absenteeism, it costs, it saves them 19,000, almost 20,000 recurringly over a number of years, together with the medical fees. And during this session, because it's quite short, I just wanted to focus more on the health and well-being of the people first. Of course, if you look at the other lines, they'll talk about the energy, ROI, and things like that follows it, right? So this is a paper that's about 20 or 30 pages. Happy to share with you more about that, more in depth. But I think if you're just talking about people, this is a very good example on how indoor air quality can affect things on the qualitative side and also on the quantitative side. So I hope you guys can make the relation from there. So the quick takeaway from me is, having good indoor air quality ticks all these boxes on the qualitative and quantitative side in terms of, where is the value chain in an organization, when people want to decide, when they say, hey, do we do this, do we do that? They always look at it from both points of view, the qualitative side and the quantitative side. And I think Paula also mentioned the second point, we easily spend 80-90% of our time indoors these days. So we don't have a choice whether we want to breathe or not. You don't breathe, you die. That's straightforward as that. So we must ensure, good IAQ in whether it's in our workplaces or whether it's our home environment. I think that's a must in this day and age. And I think the very last point I'd like to make is it's quite shocking. All this good information on IAQ has been around for the last 15, 20 years already. So it's not as if we found out about this today, it's nothing groundbreaking. And all these are all justified by science, very importantly. So we need to take action now, especially in this current climate that we are in. Virus is transmissible through the air. We need to take care of air better, take care of ourselves, take care of our children, take care of our employees and occupants and fellow people, basically. And I think that also fits into, in terms of a building being green, whether it's green mark, LEED, or well certified. IAQ, indoor air quality, is one of the main pillars for that already in this day and age, right? So this is my last slide, a little bit more about me. So I'm manager at uHoo Enterprise Solutions. At uHoo, we are advocates for clean air in buildings because everyone deserves it.
Great, excellent, thanks.
My role is, I look after the partners here. Yep. Oh, shall I continue? All right. Okay. I look after the partners, generally in Singapore and APAC, and I consult with these government agencies, corporates, and MNCs, SMEs on effective IAQ continuous monitoring strategies in the organization, how to deploy, what are the things that you should look at and so on. So I've got a lot of experience dealing across this whole spectrum of people and clients as well. So if you want, you can maybe take your phone, take a screenshot of this slide. So you have my contact number there, you have my contact email. Right, feel free to reach out. We can have a conversation, and I can share with you a little bit more about what all this means for your own organization. And not least, please follow our website. It's listed there on the business side. You can see our indoor air quality monitoring solutions on our website, with some good case studies as well to give you a feel and understanding of what we do. And also, very interestingly, we are going to launch what we call a virus risk calculator on our website very soon. It gives you an assessment about the virus risk that's in your environment. Right? I think that should be done in the next week or two. So do visit our website and find out more. Thank you.
All right, Raymond, great, thanks. Would you be able as well to share the link to that article that you referred to? Is that publicly available somewhere on the internet?
Yes, I knew that question was coming, everyone. So it's available on the internet, and I have a soft copy of that. I can share a copy if anyone is interested.
Great. It reminds me of a similar study that was done in Malaysia, where a very iconic building was compared with the eco-friendly green tech office in Bangi, And it was found that in that iconic building, the evidence of sick leave was more than double of the one in the green building in Bangi, where there's more fresh air, natural lighting and stuff like that. So this is huge when you convert that into salary related payments. You know, if you can reduce your sick leave by 50%, and if you take that into consideration when you're doing an investment projection for the ROI, Hans, it might be a bit more difficult to include that. But if we can include that as a rough calculation for upgrading towards a healthy building or for investing into IAQ monitoring and IAQ improvement, then we suddenly get an even much better ROI. Maybe it can help as well with some of the energy efficiency and a broader business building upgrade projects if we have a more holistic view. How realistic do you think, Hans, it is to convince accountants, conservative accountants, that this kind of approximation could be included in ROI calculations?
That's a good question, Matthias. I think there's two sides to this. If you are a willing recipient to this, then there is quite a lot of data there. And there is quite a lot of study and there's quite a lot of research that you can incorporate, and you can make reasonable and good assumptions to include this. So on one level, I would say absolutely feasible, absolutely doable. Now, there is a flip side to this. The challenge that I often get, because we also manage healthy and well-being buildings, they will ask me, Hans, have you got any data of buildings in KL where you have proof that over the last 36 months, they have actually reduced, their sick leave, these kind of things? And then the answer, of course, is no, we don't have that specific data yet for this particular location, right? Because the accountants, as you said, conservative. They don't want to equate an insurance company with a marketing company. So, this is very different. And as a result, they come up with reasons why it wouldn't be applicable for them. And then they push back on it. But the reality is somewhere in the middle. If you are willing to listen and you're willing to incorporate, they will accept this. But many people still fall back and say, I want a parallel number. I want to, if I'm in one floor, in one building, I want the data from my neighboring company 1 floor higher. And if you can't provide that, they will say, it's hard.
Yeah, actually, I will share with you as well that study. It's an old one, but it's a very good one. It was in a refereed journal article. And actually, it was the Petronas Twin Towers that didn't perform very well. I can say that because it is mentioned in the study, and it's a refereed journal article, so it's very credible. I'll try and find the link and share it as well in the Q&A chat box. Otherwise, get in touch with me. There is a question from Elmer that fits into this for you, Hans, as well. And then we have a question to Paula after that. Elmer is saying he has spoken with companies in Malaysia about the CO2 and formaldehyde indoor air quality standards and the DOSH standards, but it seems like people are not saying they don't implement these standards. Any comments on that?
Partially true. I think what you see is that those standards on indoor air quality, even on green building, but indoor air quality even more so, people only start recently to become aware of them and start to appreciate their value of it. So there's still a little bit of pushback from people saying, oh, my other companies have never done it, we've never done it. And they again ask the same thing, right? Why do we need to do this? What is the value for this? Why do I need to implement this? Now there's the push and the pull, right? One part of it is because it has been stipulated by the government, by the rating agencies, etc., and then they either comply, or we fall back on all of the research behind it, because this is what I tend to do, and we try to explain the value of this. But again, it comes back to the same point, right? I often equate it like this. Matthias, if you're in the market for a new car and you want to buy an electric car, you already convinced yourself that an electric car is good. I can convince you to buy a Tesla because you already wanted to buy an electric car. If you have already thought that an electric car is not right for you because you have range anxiety or other things, I can say whatever I want to say. You will fall back and say, not yet. It's too expensive. It's too difficult. It's not right. And you will go for another traditional car. Yeah. The market, of course, is switching. We got more people that moving towards these things, but we have a group of people that are convinced they will go for it. And we have a group of somewhat late adopters that still need some convincing.
All right. Great. Thanks, Hans. And
I would say also, I would add, who pays the bills, right?
Yep. Yeah. Also that.
I just jump in quickly as well. I think there was a recent news that in Indonesia, the president is being sued for air pollution as well. So, I agree with Hans as well. It takes, the next step, the next step has to be taken. And I think in the last 24 hours, the WHO also has released new guidelines of air quality, not just for the outdoors, but also indoors as well, generally. And I think, when people start to see more and more things like that, even the president is being sued in Indonesia for lots of money, right? Seriously, for air pollution. And, the WHO joining in, it takes a village, to raise a child, I believe.
Because that's really tricky. Like when we were saying, open your windows, if your city is really polluted, exactly. That's not gonna make your building really healthy, right?
Yeah, so it's an art and a science as well, so when I consult with all these companies, this is how, depending on which angle they are looking at, what country, like Singapore is quite blessed generally. The outdoor air is relatively healthy. Singapore is quite blessed.
And, if you can implement ventilation, filtration systems and stuff, exactly. Then you can ensure that maybe indoor is a lot healthier than outdoor if the city is very polluted. But I can imagine Jakarta, for example, many people will not have the means to be able to implement those filtration systems. So then, you can't just open the window anymore, right?
That's exactly right. That's why there's this qualitative aspect and there's also this quantitative aspect as well. And that's where we fit in when we consult with our clients to make them see, which direction that they should take.
Raymond, Elmar would like you to share the new WHO standard, if possible. So you have a couple of things to share. Paula, we have a question for you.
Okay.
The bamboo products, are they only used for flooring, panels, beams, cladding, and deckings?
In my house.
So
in my house, we use all local materials, right? That were being produced and manufactured really close by. We used bamboo for all of the structure, including all the beams and columns. We used sun-dried bricks for all of the walls, clay bricks that are also from nearby. And then we use local wood, which is called rajumas, which is a wood that the termites don't like because it's apparently really sour, for all of the window frames and door frames and also the flooring. So we mixed a few materials, but all of them are bio materials. So they come from earth and all of them are really available and local materials from here. And the bamboo was treated before we used it because if not, the termites will eat it. I have a small video of my house that covers a lot more aspects of it. So maybe I can share that as well. So you can take a look and then ask me through that channel if you have any more questions.
Yeah, actually in the exit poll, you can tick a box whom you want to follow up with. And then you can say you want to follow up with Paula and then message her. Great video. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I have as well seen an American guy who has a big factory in Mindanao. He is producing bamboo components for skyscrapers in North America. That's his vision, to in the future build skyscrapers from bamboo. And there is a UK company that's doing cross-laminated timber. You might have heard of this 140 million project in Singapore, mass timber. And people are starting to see whether bamboo can be used because it's the best material. It grows fast, It absorbs a lot of carbon. It needs very little water. You cut it, it grows back by itself. Bamboo is the real deal. And
so right now there's that trend, but it's actually a necessity of going to, they are trying to do timber skyscrapers to substitute cement as much as possible. You know, cement it's a large CO2 emitter. Only the manufacturing of cement, right? Construction on itself, it's a huge CO2 emitter. And if we want to decarbonize construction materials, the manufacturing of those materials needs to be a lot less polluting. So that's why we're going for wood. Bamboo is an incredible material. It goes, I think the oldest bamboo piece in my house was 4 years old and it had 16 meters. So imagine a material that in 4 years you can harvest, and it's actually a grass and it only needs the sun and a little bit of water to grow. And then you just need to cut it and transport to site, which is a bit tricky because they are big pieces, right? They are long pieces. So the moment you start laminating it, then you absorb it's really strong. It's almost like reinforced concrete in one material, right? And even if you cut it or it cracks, because it all works with threads, it's still very structural resistant, so it could last very long. So as soon as you treat it, you're way to go for a long, long time.
Yeah, I love it. And I would love to use it in the future as well. We've come up with the hour. Let me do the exit poll. Then we watch a video. And then I suggest we keep the room open for any who still want to chit chat. I think we still have quite a lot of stuff to talk about. Not sure whether the speakers are available. I have another 15 minutes time. Let me launch the exit poll. You can connect with Paula if you want to follow up with her, Hans, Raymond, or myself. If you want any additional information, let us know, and uHoo will facilitate that based on your questions and comments. I can share with you as well this ESG study. We will actually have next month a session on schools, colleges, universities. What can we do in those premises with regards to indoor air? And in November, we will have a session on ESG. How do indoor air quality, wellness, and environment, social governance connect with one another? The new mega trend from the financial investment community, both rating companies on ESG and wanting to see ESG performance. So great. A couple of people want to follow up. Raymond is the most popular. 70% of people who clicked want to follow up with Raymond. So Raymond, you should get some good inquiries. I'll end the poll and we will facilitate that. And I think we're going to watch a very short video, and then we can keep chit-chatting if everybody is still available. Are you okay hanging on a couple of more minutes, Hans and Paula, or you have to move on?
Okay.
I have like around 10 minutes.
Okay, good. Yeah. Cheska is showing a quick video, and then we will continue our chit-chat.
Tenants are worried about the air they breathe in their workplace due to COVID-19. Science has shown that poor indoor air increases the risk of coronavirus surviving and spreading through the air. Your tenant's safety may be at risk if they are exposed to poor air quality, resulting in worsened allergies and asthma, and may lead to long-term illnesses. Tenants who don't feel safe and comfortable are not likely to stay. There's never been an easy way to deal with problems in the air until now. uHoo Aura continuously monitors all the important things in the air so you know exactly what to do to improve it. View real-time and historical data of all your locations and manage them from one dashboard. Get alerts if any of your buildings exceed safety limits so you can immediately take action. You'll get tips on what you can do to reduce the risk and ensure the safety of your tenants 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. uHoo. Take control. Ensure safety. Reduce churn.
All right, get your uHoo, and we have more questions coming in. The first one, again, on bamboo. Bamboo is becoming very, very hot topic. Paula, can you tell us more on how to treat the bamboo?
So there's a few different versions. The version that I know that works really well, it's when you you have to treat it with borax acid and like sunk the bamboo in a pool with borax acid during a month and then let it dry. That is proven from Colombia and South America to here to work. There is other people that treat it with what's called free might and other more natural ways, because acid is always not the most ideal. However, the results are not that great yet. So this would be a great way, a great study process to see how could we treat bamboo in a more sustainable way than borax. But for now, this is the only way. However, the borax pools, you can put your bamboo, take it out, put another one, so they last quite long and it's not that polluting. I mean, there's not like washouts or washes off or anything like that. So at least that's better than other things.
It's similar to what the American guys in Mindanao are doing. I think they have a borax treatment as well. As Paula said, it's not the most eco-friendly. I'm doing a project with a Finnish company. This Finnish company has a combined thermal and mechanical modification technology where you dry the wood or the bamboo in a sequence of 2 days, which is very fast, but you densify it and you thermally modify it. That gives it long-term durability. So that is another way of doing it, but that hasn't been fully researched yet, but that could be the breakthrough in more eco-friendly way of treating it and turning it into CLT material as well. CLT, the cross-laminated timber, is like thick components that can replace the cement and the concrete as walls and as floors. That is where we are getting the opportunity that Paula was referring to decarbonize the building envelope already at a construction stage, rather than, the most focus on decarbonization is currently operation. But operation is fairly easy, but the construction, that's where wood, bamboo, timber will be the new mega trend in the future, because you can't do it with steel and cement. You can't effectively decarbonize with steel and cement.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I see more questions coming in here. Elmer, Raymond, we hope to get a copy or link to the uHoo video as well. So maybe you can share it down there. Let me actually just try and share as well. I'll show you guys the article I just mentioned early on, because I think it's very powerful here. This is, they actually, can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
And this blue line and the gray line, this is a workplace study, and they did an ESG, environmental social governance analysis, on happy, healthy, wellness kind of companies based on AI data that they could get from the internet. And then they analyzed S&P 500 stocks and matched the top five performers in terms of good workplace sentiment versus the lowest 5%. And you can see it started in 2006, and it started with $1 as the measurement. And the high workplace sentiment companies with great spirit, great air quality, great wellness, great health and safety outperformed massively the gray lowest 5% performing companies. I think if you look at the lowest 5% companies, their share price went from $1 in average to $2.5 over that 15 years period. The 5% with the highest rating on workplace sentiment turned $1 to $5. So we have an outperformance of $2.50 over the same time period in terms of how the stock price developed. Isn't that amazingly powerful data? I'll share the article link here. It's a bit of a long one, but I'll put it into the chat box so you guys can have a look at it as well. But I thought that was really incredible study, and they mentioned as well some of the companies in that article. You can look it up. So there's a lot of interesting things coming along, And I think if maybe I can try and make a conclusion from this seminar, we need to look at the qualitative benefits that we get. And some benefits are just so great that they are worth it, even though we can't quantify it. Especially if you look at the example of Paula, her own home, you know, the health and wellness of your family. And now in times of COVID, we have realized how important the mental health is. If we're just stuck in concrete all the time, and we have bad air quality and no fresh air and no windows to see nature and no nature surrounding us, it really has it takes a toll on us. So that's a very important realization. Then the conclusion as well, green buildings don't cost anything extra if you get the experts involved at the beginning. And actually, you know, your PKNS case study, Hans, the maybe 3.3 extra, that was just, I think, the solar alone, right? Might have made up that one, or even more than that one.
Yes, I think the majority of the cost sits on that solar.
Yeah, because it's definitely an added cost. If you are investing in solar, it gives you a return, but you know, maybe most of the other things were cost neutral that you guys did. So they definitely already paid themselves. So I think we had great examples. We had Raymond sharing an incredible study that's 20 years old, but confirms what we start realize more and more. Good indoor air quality, healthy buildings pay through reduced sick leave. And if you have high sick leave with your company, you got to do something about it. It might even mean, you know, change the location. If it's so bad, if you are living in a building that has systemic, you know, sick building syndrome, unless your building owner is going to upgrade it seriously and invest a lot of money, you might want to move out, because that asset is going down the drain. I mean, in ESG risk analysis, this would be called a potential, you know, asset. I can't remember the expression for it in ESG terms, but that asset might not be worth anything anymore in the future. So there's a huge transition risk as we move to healthier living, healthier building, or low carbon society. If you have a coal-fired power plant, that's a huge transition risk for decarbonization. So thanks, Paula. Thanks, Hans. Thanks, Raymond. And thanks, uHoo. Thanks, everyone, for contributing, staying with us. We still have a lot of people online. Good to see that you guys are, and we have some nice comments here. Roberto says, thanks for the wonderful presentations. So that's good to hear from you guys. We really appreciate that feedback, and see you back again next month at the uHoo webinar. We'll be focused on educational institutions in October. And then in November, we'll focus on ESG and indoor air quality, the linkage. Bye-bye, everyone. See you again soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.